Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Ask and it shall be given. It shall be given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Seek and ye shall find. Oh, just knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Oh, ask and it shall be given. It shall be given unto you. These blessings shall be mine. Oh, these blessings shall be mine. These blessings shall be mine. Oh, these blessings shall be mine. Shall be mine. Shall be mine, saith the Lord. Say, seek and ye shall find. Seek and ye shall find. Oh, just knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Oh, ask and it shall be given. It shall be given unto you. Say, seek and ye shall find. Seek and ye shall find. Oh, and all you do is knock. Shall be opened unto you. Open your mouth and ask, and it shall be given. It shall be given unto you. See, blessing shall be mine. Blessing shall be mine. Shall be mine. Saith the Lord. Sing it again, say, blessing shall. Oh, blessing shall be mine. Blessing shall be mine. Shall be mine. Saith the Lord.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome again to the Midweek Wednesday night Bible class, Bible study for the Southside Church of Christ here in Orlando, Florida. Beloved, believe it or not, this is the last Wednesday night of this year, 2021. God has been beneficently kind to all of us, and in the fact that He's allowed us and privileged us to reach the brink and the cusp of a new year. And for that and all His blessings, we are eternally grateful. We at Southside encourage you, exhort you, we admonish you to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work and the way of the Lord, and make your walk with God in 2022 even better, stronger, more viable, more evidence to the world that there is a God and Jesus is His Son. Continue to pray for the Tinsley family and the Wilson family. Sister Andrina Wilson lost her nephew, and of course Sister Lovely Tinsley, our beloved Sister Lovely Tinsley, in her 90s. Her brother Tinsley is well into his 90s, and Sister Tinsley had breached the 90s as well. Her funeral will be Saturday, January 8th, tentatively scheduled at 11 a.m. at the 9th Street Church of Christ. Our Brother Snell and I will be co-eulogizing Sister Tinsley because both of us were her preachers. And what a bold, dynamic family. We're praying for them and this horrific loss. Even though she lived to be a ripe age, it's still difficult for loved ones when they lose someone who's been there all of their lives. So pray for the Tinsleys, the Wilsons, and many more. Please pray for Sister Valerie Jefferson's daughter, who's having had major surgery in Panama City. I'm just prayerful for her. She solicits prayer, and we all do. Sister Burke is her name. Please pray for Valerie Jefferson's daughter and the major medical malady she's having at this time. Beloved, as we make the transition prayerfully into a new year, I want to talk tonight briefly about the joy and the vanity of life. The joy and the vanity of life. Life is intertwined, interwoven. Life tends to be a plethora of things that are sometimes inconsistent. There's joy and pain, sunshine and rain. But life has joy, and then life is full of vanities. Our teacher tonight shall be none other than Solomon, the son of David. He wrote this intriguing book of the Bible called Ecclesiastes. He opens that powerful palliative book in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And again, verse 1 and 12, he says, vanity, vanity, all is vanity in life. Solomon in this book, very, very descriptive manuscript. I encourage you to inundate yourself with it at your earliest convenience. He describes his search, Solomon does, for the true meanings in life. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 13, his search pertains to life under the sun. He's saying, listen, while I'm here tabernacling on earth, here's the things I've learned, and here's the things I've experienced. He said, here's my ups and my downs. And he concluded the matter by saying, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. The word praise is used 29 times in 27 verses in chapter 1. He discusses the vanities of life in an exorbitant and abundant way. He used the word vanity of life 35 times in the 29 verses. He opens Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2 and 14, using that term, the vanities of life. Yet, simultaneously, and this is the beautiful thing, he is not dominated just by the vanities of life. Solomon goes on and talks in this same book of Ecclesiastes. He mentions the word joy 3 times. He mentions the word enjoy 3 times. He mentions the word enjoyment 2 times. He mentions the word rejoice 4 times. And he mentions the word joyfully 1 time. This book of Ecclesiastes, beloved, provides counsel on how you and I can get the most out of life. It's a book that I encourage you to saturate and polysaturate your mind and your heart with, and it'll help you develop wisdom. It provides great counsel on how you and I can get the most out of life. One noted philosopher, I believe it was Socrates, said, life is not short. You know, we often have this saying, life is short. His philosophy teaches that life is not short. It's just that we waste so much time on things that don't matter. The vanities of life. So Socrates was really mimicking and parroting the words of Solomon. Any good philosopher finds his truths rooted in the book called the Bible. So let's tonight operate under 2 different umbrellas. The subject tonight, the joy and the vanities of life. Let's look first at the vanity of life and look in a constructive way of what Solomon mentioned, describes, and pontificates on the vanities of life right here in this book of Ecclesiastes. There's no need to move any further. There's a plethora of information about the vanity of life and the joy in life right here in this exorbitant book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon, who was king of Israel, he was the son of David. His tenure was expansive. He was notable and wise and prudent. He had a good 40-year run on the throne of Israel. But in Ecclesiastes, he drops his kingship mantle and he puts on his hat of the preacher. He says, Solomon the preacher. Implicit to say, suffice it to say, I learned more about life as a preacher than I did as a king. The vanities of life, he says, here's the preacher's experience. He mentions all this in Ecclesiastes. Listen, beloved. He warns against the vanity of pleasure. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1. He says, everything in life has to be measured and guarded. Pleasure is not bad, but pleasure unbridled is a horrible vanity to profess. Then he warns against the vanity of the industry of labor. Again, life is about balance. Every man needs to work, but no man needs to work so much that he neglects his family and his faith. We got a lot of men that don't work enough. We got a few men that work too much. No industry of labor should trump your faith and your family. Solomon, ironically, in the book of Ecclesiastes, warns about that, as if he had a divine telescope looking down the corridors of time, as if he knew that capitalism would be the predominant course and system that the world would live under in these mundane times. So he warns not only against the vanities of pleasure, we often preach about that. He warns against the vanity of the industry of labor. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 11. And then chapter 2, verse 22 and 23. And Ecclesiastes 4 and 4. All warning against the vanity of working too much in the absence of family and in the absence of faith. Then he warns us about the vanity of human wisdom. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 15. We all need wisdom, but human wisdom can be a trap for us if we're not careful. You think because you've lived in the world, but we're not of the world. He warns against that. He warns against the vanity of life, period. How life and living can make us sometimes obscure to the things that are spiritual. If we're not careful, we'll be enveloped by physical things and not controlled by spiritual things. Solomon goes on, beloved, right here in Ecclesiastes, to warn about the vanity of inheritance, substance, living so you can get something instead of give something. Life should not, Solomon warns, be about what you're going to inherit. Life is more about what you're going to leave. He then warns, that's in Ecclesiastes, vanities of life, Ecclesiastes 2:17, the vanities of inheritance, Ecclesiastes 2, verse 19 through 21. Then, beloved, he moves on to talk about the vanities of earthly existence. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 19 to 21. The vanities, then he goes on to the vanities of riches over your family. That's a redundant theme, perpetual, chronic, stated again and again. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Then he ironically mentions the vanity of political popularity. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 16. Then he talks about the vanity of loving abundance, when you never have enough. The psalmist mentioned that the eyes of man are never satisfied. If you want to read about the vanity of political popularity, that's there in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 16. He then warns about the vanity of loving abundance. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10. Yes, Solomon knew, God knew that political popularity, if we do things, I hate politics, even in the church, because when people have political motives, we often don't do the right thing. And when we do the right thing, sometimes you can do it for the wrong reason. So we're warned about that vanity. Then my man Solomon moves to the vanity of wealth without the gift of God. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 2. Nothing against wealth. Solomon himself was rich. Solomon was mega rich. Solomon was so rich, you remember that the Queen of Sheba, that bronze black lady, came from the land of Sheba and observed him and how he built this monstrosity of a sanctuary and a temple and a tabernacle, a cathedral that his father was not allowed to build. And when she observed the exorbitant costs and observed how organized Solomon was, how attentive his ministers were, that they went into the temple, ascended into the temple, how orchestrated things were, and they observed all the pomp and circumstance of the moment. She said, I had heard about you, Solomon, in my land, but the half was not told unto me. So he does not preach against wealth, but he does warn us against the vanity of wealth without the gift of God. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 2. Then he goes on to warn us about the vanity of wandering desire. When you got eyes everywhere, the psalmist said that the eyes of man are never satisfied. You have to be aware, keenly aware of wandering desire. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 9. Then Solomon segues to talk about the vanity of injustice in this life. Some people are so consumed about what they perceive as injustice in this life. They fight their whole life about what's wrong in life and forget to celebrate what's right in life. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 4. And then he talks about the vanity of days of darkness. That's in Ecclesiastes 11, verse number 8. Oh, yeah. Then he segues into the vanity of childhood and youth. And that's where he starts in chapter 11, Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 10. The vanity of childhood and youth, adolescence, puberty, when you're young. You remember all of us falling in this category. When you're 18, 19, 20, 21, you think you know everything. And Lord knows when you go by and get 2 semesters of college, we all thought we knew everything. Now your mom and daddy don't have no sense. Your preacher, your pastor ain't got no sense. Your church leaders and the old sage, venerable people at church don't have no sense. Because when you're young, you think you know everything. I can't tell you the countless scores of people who sit across from me at my desk, and I'm trying to tell them, oh, I know that. They about to get married. We done talked about that. We got that. We. Less than a year later, they realized something I already knew, that they don't have it. That what you thought you knew, you didn't know. So he warns us against that youthful arrogance, that youthful childhood narcissism, where you feel like you know everything. And then, though, those are the vanities of life that Solomon warns us of in this beautiful manuscript, this expose called Ecclesiastes. And then he talks about the joy in life. Yeah, joy, pain, sunshine, and rain. This one writer, this descriptive writer, talked about the vanities of life, and then he segues to talk in the same book about the joys in life. His experience not only led him to know about the vanity, wine, women, and song, he knew also about the joys in life. He talks about, and it's a didactic contrast, very interesting. He says, you know what's joyful? Is when your heart can rejoice in labor. That's in Ecclesiastes 2 and 10. And in the same verse, he talks about the reward of labor is really the joy in doing it. So he warns of the vanity of working too much in lieu of family and faith. And then he also talks about the joy of working enough and providing for family and supporting your faith. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10. Same Solomon talks about the joy of simple things in life. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24. The simple things in life. We just came out of Christmas, and most of us buy our children and grandchildren something exorbitant, expensive, and you got to spend half the night trying to put it together and buy batteries to put in it. And you know, as a child, to go get a spoon and a pan out of the cabinet and start beating on it. Something simple. Get their attention more than the exorbitant. That's really how life is. You know, the best times in life Pam and I ever had when we lived in a single-wide trailer, had a hibachi grill about this much. You could put 2 leg quarters on at one time. That would be our dinner. I would cook it on the hibachi grill on the steps of the trailer. Life was simple. Life was plain. And life, we was happy. With blessings come burdens and stress. Solomon informs us to learn to enjoy and rejoice over the simple things in life. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24. And to also rejoice and have the ability to enjoy the things that come from God. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 25. Joy also in working for heritage, not what would happen after you're gone. I'm not even saying that right. Solomon says, instead of focus on your heritage and inheritance after you're gone, learn to rejoice, appreciate, value the things you have while you're here on earth, and not focus on what would happen to your stuff after you're gone. Paul said in Colossians chapter 3, set your affections on things above, not on the things of this earth. He's talking about spiritual things. What Solomon warns us over here is when you're consumed and saturated and polysaturated about physical material things. And you do know whatever you have, you're going to leave. And if you got crazy children and grandchildren, they're going to take it. Some of them will use it. Others will abuse it. I had an exhaustive conversation with my sister today about that. And I'm one of these people, I don't do a lot of talking about here's what I want you to do after I'm dead and gone. When I'm dead and gone, I'm dead and gone. I hear people say, I don't want a long funeral. Well, you ain't going to be troubled by how long or short it is. And whatever I tell you, I hope they do it. But if they don't, I won't know it and won't care. So I'm not so consumed about what's going to happen here on earth after I'm gone. This is what Solomon warns about in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 22. What I am concerned about is where I'm going to spend eternity. I hope, trust, and pray that those I love and those I instruct will follow what my wishes are pertaining to the things that pertain to me. But if they don't, I don't know. If they don't, I can't do nothing about it. So Solomon warns about that. Don't be so consumed about stuff, your heritage, and what's going to happen to your stuff after you're gone. He then goes on and says, you rejoice in what you have and don't be worried about what's going to happen after you're gone. But he says, rejoice in the days of prosperity and then contemplate the days of adversity. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 14. He's a wise man. You got to learn to enjoy the good times and then learn from your bad times. Some people don't even enjoy the days of prosperity, good days. They're so worried, consumed about what may happen, that ain't even happen. What is it they used to say, the old folk, I think my dad used to say, you talking about drowning and we ain't even got to the river yet. Yeah, some people are so worried and consumed about what may happen. Negativity always popping up. Rejoice when things are good, and then learn when things are bad or in adversity. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 14. He also says, the joys in life, he says, eat and drink with a merry heart. This is Ecclesiastes 9 and 7. Now, I don't write the Bible, I just preach it and teach it. They drank wine in his time, and they drink wine today, as you very well know. He says, when you eat and drink, do it with a merry heart. Enjoy life. Appreciate a good meal with family and a good drink with friends. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 7. And then he says, express joy in how you're living. And listen, all that is relative. If you came from a real bad place, you may not be fun now, but you appreciate where you came from. And so he says in Ecclesiastes 9 and 8, express joy in how God allows you to live. Then that same Solomon goes on and said, live joyfully with your loved ones, because stuff and things and materialism does not matter if you have no one to share it with. So he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse number 9, live joyfully with your loved ones. I was sharing with someone today, even on today, I love holiday seasons just because it's family time. I've gotten to the point I appreciate, I'm talking about my immediate family, my mom, my sister, my brother-in-law, my 2 children, my 2 grandchildren, my wife, my son, my daughter, all those in our concentric circle. You learn to value and appreciate it. Sometimes our circles in life are too big. And then when people disappoint us, because they never really was as tight with you as you think they are, you just learn to live joyfully with the people who you know love you like you love them. And then he starts capsuling this great book of Ecclesiastes, one of my favorite sections. When you get to chapter 11 and 12, he starts bringing up his youth. And then he warns us about the vanities of youth. And then he also informs us about the joys of youth. He says, enjoy your youth and remember you are accountable even when you're young. That's in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 9. Solomon again says, enjoy your young days. But I'm going to tell you something. We all look back and say, oh, if I could turn back the hands of time and know what I know now. Solomon says, enjoy things while you're young, when you can run everywhere, stay up late, get up early, sick and get well real fast. You know, don't nothing hurt. You don't know you got it back to hurt. You better enjoy those days, young people. But remember, he also put a caveat, an addendum. You are accountable. Whatever you do when you're young will come back on you when you're old. It's good advice to enjoy those things, to celebrate those things. Again, under the umbrella of the joys in life. And then the last thing he talks about is that there's joy in fearing God and keeping his commandments. And he says that is the whole reason of living, the whole duty of man. And that's in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. Joy in life is to fear God and keep his commandments. That is the whole duty of man. So tonight, you look at the joys of life and the vanities of life. He warns us that there are many things that trip us up because they're vain and mundane, and our focus and attention, we chase after these vanities. And he speaks from personal experience. I love the transparency he displays in this book. He says, I was the king. I had women, wine, song, money, palatial palaces. I traveled on, 24, bouncing on 24-inch rims on my chariots. But he says, oh, that's vanity. He warns us about all these things we talked about tonight, the vanities of life. But in his infinite wisdom, being so wise and saved Jesus Christ, the wisest man ever lived, in the same book, he gives us the joys of life. He talks about family and faith and working and being rewarded for our labor, not to emphasize materialism over spiritual things. He talks about prosperity and then yet learning from the days of adversity. He talks about letting your hair down, eat and drink with a merry heart. Express joy and appreciation on how God allows you to live. Joyful, playful with your loved ones. Enjoy your young days because they won't last. And know whatever you do when you're young, you will still be accountable. And then he capsules by saying the greatest joy in life, and Solomon is absolutely positively right. The greatest joy in life is to fear God and to keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. What a joy and an ecstasy tonight for me to share with you both the joy and the vanities of life. Our teacher, our expositor director tonight is none other than the wise man Solomon and this great book of Ecclesiastes. Let us learn and grow together as we enter the new year. Let me admonish you to be with us this Sunday, the first Sunday of the year, January 2nd. Historically, it's a large attendance day. It's the first Sunday of the month and the first Sunday of the year. We encourage you, those who can and will, join us at 4701 Raleigh Street for our in-person worship. But preponderously speaking, most of you worship with us on live stream. We have absolutely no problem with that. I would inform you, if and when the Omicron virus is out of hand so much that we may need to postpone worship for a week or two. We're not there yet, but if that were to happen, believe me, you will be notified by all of our social medias. We just, again, encourage all of you to wear a mask when you're at Southside. It's very difficult for you to do this, but I'm still warning you and telling you, please, ma'am, please, sir, once worship is over, we don't need a lot of exorbitant fellowship. We will encourage you, particularly with the surge in the virus, leave, get in your car, and go home. I notice we're getting lax again. We stand around talking the foyer, stand around talk outside for another hour. What we're trying to do is just be safe, be judiciously careful. Good news, on Sunday we baptized a young lady. Now this is my bad on my part. Her name escapes me. I had it written down somewhere and I don't have it with me. But she is the daughter-in-law of Sister Lily Davis. She is attended for a long time, great family and friends of all those in that family, and she put on Christ Sunday afternoon. What a joy and ecstasy. We will welcome her to the fold again on Sunday morning, and I promise you I have all of her information for you. God bless you. God keep you. This is our prayer. Be blessed, be encouraged, and also just remember and never forget, life has both joy and vanities, and the one you exercise the most will give you the maximum benefit. God bless you. See you next week.